Shabbat is the anniversary of Rebecca Smith's bat mitzvah. She's 13. I know she looks a lot older, but she's 13 years old and basically read the whole Parsha for us this morning and the Haftarah. Rebecca's incredible. Rebecca, thank you. I know you worked hard and you didn't really have to do this, but we all felt tremendous joy listening to you chant the Torah reading this morning. Made Shabbat Shira very special. So the opening verse that Rebecca chanted in the Torah reading, Vayehi Beshalaĥ Paro et ha'am, and it came when Pharaoh let the people go. Lo nacham Elohim derech eretz plishtim, ki karov hu. The people were being led by this pillar of fire, and God made the decision not to have the pillar lead the people through the land of the Philistines, because karov hu, it was too short away. So today I want to talk about shortcuts and taking the long way sometimes as a philosophy of life. Today and throughout history, leaders and thinkers often make decisions based on an illusion that you can engineer the future to be whatever you want it to be. You have a vision, maybe some utopian fantasy of what society or the world ought to look like. You create policies and systems to achieve those results, and just like the microwave prepares your food according to the inputs on the keypad, society just becomes transformed according to the policies and systems that you put into place. The achievements of modern technology amplify this illusion. We live in a time of shortcuts. Technology gives us incredible control over reality, and many things that were once long have become short. We dial a number in Canada, and our voice is heard in Australia. A high-speed train is constructed, and the distance between downtown and the periphery shrinks. We type in a Zoom meeting ID or log into a live stream, and we're magically connected to a room full of other people, even though we may be sitting alone. What was once far suddenly becomes close. And it's true that all around us we see space under the control of its planners, and we are tempted to think that we can have similar control over time. Just as with proper planning, you can pave a road or build a bridge or design a city, with proper planning, you can shape the next month or the next year or the next decade. Perhaps the most famous modern thinker who claimed that he could reveal the laws of history and shape the future was Karl Marx. He wrote, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." And to this day, some of Marx's students and successors believe that the future can be shaped strategically to achieve the ideal outcome. This way of thinking, this fallacy, it's not just the domain of the left. National Socialism, commonly known as Nazism, also set out to redeem the world and create a new harmonious society based on faulty racial science and eugenics. In Judaism, these revolutionary fantasies are the essence of idolatry. People confuse the Torah's prohibition on idolatry. Idolatry is not just bowing down to a stone object. Idolatry is taking anything finite, whether it's an object or an institution or even a vision of humanity, and declaring that to be absolute. And of course, the Torah strictly forbids idolatry and warns of its allures and its dangers. When we worship God, we are worshiping that which extends beyond all human limits, that which is not controllable by finite creatures. That is why authoritarian movements and regimes typically try and crush traditional religions, any traditional religion that is in their orbit. In the world of political theory, it's not religion that warns against this type of idolatry, but a type of political thought called conservatism, a word that gets a bad rap, but that I think ought to be re-examined. Conservatism, which comes to shatter the illusion that the future can be controlled. To be conservative means to be skeptical and cautious about the future, to be hesitant in efforts to break from established norms and traditions. Conservative political thought asserts that the future is a mystery and that time is fundamentally different from space. The future cannot be predicted and certainly cannot be engineered. Friedrich Hayek, who was one of the major thinkers of conservative thought in the 20th century, when explaining why the future is beyond our control, highlighted what is commonly called the law of unintended consequences. All of our actions, whether they are in the realms of technology or policy or religion, have results that are not part of their original purpose. All of them. And this fundamental truth needs to impact our choices and decisions. Let me give you a couple of examples of famous unintended consequences. One from contemporary life and one from the Torah. The internet revolution, which all of us celebrate, that came along in the 90s, it also came along with the hope that all of this access to information would make the world more democratic. The prediction was simple. The internet democratizes knowledge, the free availability of truth, now accessible to everyone equally. It will eliminate hierarchical structures and promote equality, freedom, and democracy. Within 20 years now, it was discovered that the internet did democratize information, but also democratized disinformation. As a result, conspiracy theories that were once on the fringes of society now migrate to the center. Instead of a widespread of truth, we got a widespread of lies to come along with it. The internet did not make the world more democratic. It made it less so. No one predicted it, and I doubt if anyone could. And from the Torah, a much earlier example. Did you ever ask yourself why Pharaoh bought so quickly into Joseph's interpretations of his dream? With the good wheat and the fat cows, followed by the opposite, with food being at the root of those dreams. Pharaoh had many people at his court. I'm sure many offered interpretations that were interesting. Why was Pharaoh convinced that Joseph had it right. I would submit that it wasn't so much the interpretation of Pharaoh's dream that pleased Pharaoh, as much as it was the plan of action that Joseph suggested. Joseph interpreted the dream, but then he said, "And here, Pharaoh, is what you're going to do. You're going to take control of the whole economy. You're going to buy up everybody's wheat. You're going to store it in grain houses. And you will release it into the marketplace in the way you deem to be appropriate, only in quantities approved by the state." Think about it. Pharaoh didn't care about the dream's interpretation. What he liked, as is typical of authoritarian leaders, was having an excuse to concentrate more power. And whether the plan worked or not, Pharaoh didn't care. He could just blame Joseph. He would be the scapegoat and the front man. Joseph was the one who envisioned the plan and who carried it out, and it is plausible to think that when the famine ended and people found themselves more powerless against the mighty state of the Egyptian Pharaoh, blame Joseph and his people is exactly what they did. They directed their anger and resentment at him. Perhaps you could say that it was Joseph himself who unknowingly laid the groundwork for the eventual enslavement of his people. Joseph didn't predict this, didn't foresee it. He was just trying to interpret a dream, but the law of unintended consequences, that's just what happened. These two examples illustrate the frightening fact that history almost never behaves as we expect it to behave, and that often actually the most significant impacts of our actions come not from what we have intended, but mainly from what we have not. And since we cannot predict the unintended consequences of our actions, we cannot predict the results of our actions. So how are we to behave? How are we to make decisions, given all the randomness and unpredictability that inevitably ensues whenever we do anything? And this is the bedrock. This is the rationale behind conservatism towards politics, towards religion, to defend and promote an approach that believes in acting cautiously, modestly, and pragmatically. That is the approach of conservative Judaism, an approach that affirms that history is not physics, time is not space, that we have not cracked the laws of history, that the future is beyond our control, and a radical re-envisioning of Judaism is highly dangerous. In my mind, in our time, it is crucially important for us to rethink and defend a conservative approach. We are in a world characterized by dogmatism, radicalism, and immoderation. It is a radicalism that has affected the left and the right in the culture around us. On the left, an increasingly vocal group seeking the radical rejection and transformation of any ideas and institutions that you might call traditional. A group that says that everything in the past is wrong and that it's our job to correct those wrongs according to our own preferences. And on the right, Another increasingly vocal group that says just the opposite, that the traditions of the past have to be restored, that any effort to tweak them or critique them is evil. This is the type of thinking that's taking root all over the world, a black and white world. I'm traveling to Israel this week, frightened to see what I believe this way of thinking has done to Israeli society. How Israel, like many other democracies, has turned, in many cases, to ideologies that do not believe in modest change, but in reforms which are speedy and radical and even revolutionary. Conservatism, to be conservative, does not mean to be opposed to change. Here at Beth Tikvah, we have instituted many, but it disagrees about the pace of change. It worries about stability. It worries about the danger of unintended consequences. I know that this is not a popular philosophy today. Human beings do not like unresolved tensions. When a tension appears, our strong desire is to resolve it. But we have to remember the roots and essence of conservative thought, which is crucial today. Tensions are not always meant to be resolved. In fact, they help us find happy balance, which is at the core of living a good life. Tensions between the short road and the long road. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was nearer. Casuto wrote, "The land of the Philistines was too near. It would have brought the Israelites to the land of Canaan too soon." And our sages taught, Yesh derech tzara shehi aruka. There's a short road that actually ends up being the long road. V'yesh derech aruka shehi derech tzara. But prefer the long road that in the end ends up being the short one. The long road is the road of authentic Judaism. We are a faith of continual practice, constant study, and deep introspection. A faith that recognizes how complex the world is and takes account of our ignorance. And I would submit that it's not just the Jewish world, but the whole world that has to rethink the lessons of the long way, the conservative way, in every aspect of our lives. It is the way which calls on us to walk through time with open minds and a willingness to say, I don't know. A way which is suspicious of simple answers and defends acting slowly and carefully, a way that embraces the tensions of life and that hands over the future only to God. Shabbat Shalom.